Good morning, California. Good afternoon, Europe. Good evening, or should I say good night, Taiwan. Hello, everybody. For those who have just connected to this first HLF Connect Briefing, my name is Karen Amram, and I'm the chair of the High-Level Forum. Well, so far so good. I should say, I have to say that's great. That's brilliant. We've had so far two wonderful, enthralling panels, and I know that the last one will be as good as the first ones. So thank you very much for being with us today. Before we start, I would like to say a few things. So we have just visited a few other ecosystems. It was the second ecosystem gallery of the day. And so we've been to Tampere, we've been to Leuven, we've been to Houston, we've been to Atlanta, to Montreal, to Tsukuba, Thailand, and Sydney, the greater Sydney, Australia. I'm afraid we couldn't take you to Lund and to other ecosystems because some films were received a bit too late. But the good news is that you will be able to watch these additional films on the platform. That's the first good news. We'll have many other good news later on today, but unfortunately, there is a very, very sad news. Some of you know already that we've lost someone lost to COVID, one of the staunchest friends of the HLF, my dear friend Jean-Daniel Torchman. This morning we paid our respect to him this morning in Europe, and I would like to start this panel by paying our respect again. Before giving the floor to Richard Dasher, Professor Dasher, who is live from Stanford, I would like to launch this panel and invite you to have a listen again to the mayor of Grenoble, Eric Piolle, who recorded this video, particularly because he is really interested in how the ecosystem, how ecosystems are tackling our resilience and how the cities in general are.
Resilience is at the core of our mindset in Grenoble. At our city council, we have designated a councillor who is specifically in charge of risk, long-term strategy, vision, and territorial resilience. Similarly to other cities across the world, a collective movement is being shaped in Grenoble. It seeks to secure our territories when facing the immense impacts of the global pandemic and of climate change, of course, but also of many potential failures, indeed technical, social, economic issues that might also lie ahead in our future. We must invent new answers in order to face the immediate and future challenges. In order to do so, we can confidently rely on our local resources. I have in mind scientists, of course, technical ones, of course, but also the one that comes from our communities and our citizens. That is the case with the coronavirus. Here in Grenoble, we are working hand in hand with local experts and with citizen groups that in order to help identify issues and invent innovative answers and local answers. I'm convinced we can develop and pass on a culture of resilience to our population. It will be built on the grounds of collective work and helping out each other. This global vision of innovation and resilience must be broken down and applied to all of the most important sectors that we are concerned by: health, public transport, housing, entertainment. The challenge here is to increase the resistance of our territories, while building a future desirable for all. In Grenoble, we work both with the CEA and with all of the actors of Giant in order to develop smart grids. At the same time, we are working on emerging transition with our local energy provider, JEJ, that produce energy that will be 100% green, meaning no fossil, no nuclear, within 2 years. And this is a way for us to work on this transition. It's both a radical and pragmatic approach here, which lead us to build territories open to the world, but as well autonomous and resilient at the same time. I wish you a successful collaboration here in order to shape on our outlooks and experiences on those questions. Many thanks for your time, many thanks for being here, and have a great collaboration work here, based in Grenoble.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I have the floor now. Is that correct? Okay. So yes. I'm Richard Dasher. I direct the U.S. Asia Technology Management Center at Stanford University, and I'm very happy to be able to welcome you to this third panel discussion in the first ever HLF Connect. So I'm seeing here information about Grenoble, I think. So okay, here we go. Now I'm recognizing the slides. So for our panel, this session, we want to discuss the topic of what kind of changes the current COVID pandemic is causing to our ecosystems, and which will be long-term, which will be short-term. How can our systems be more resilient in the face of this kind of challenge? For this, I have a wonderful panel. Mr. Greg Morin is the Director of Strategy and Innovation at Argonne National Laboratory. Mr. Emmanuel Rouede is Director of the City of Grenoble. Dr. Koby Rubinstein is Executive Vice President for Research of the Technion. Dr. Stephen Su is Vice President and General Director of ITRI in Taiwan. Ms. Emilie Viasnoff is Director of Strategy and Programs for CEA Technology. And finally, Mr. Peter Ylén is the Principal Scientist and Team Leader for Smart City Impact Assessment in VTT, which is the Tampere, Finland ecosystem. So I'd like to start out by giving some summary of the discussions that we had in a working group for the high-level forum. 3 of us in the panel were on this working group. We represented on the working group Chicago, Argonne National Laboratory, the Technion in Israel, Hsinchu in Taiwan, myself from the US, and also the Tampere ecosystem. And we were looking at the overall impact of the kind of pandemic, and that itself varied greatly. Taiwan was able to keep infections to a minimum and bounce back very quickly, whereas the US and the Europe are in the middle of our huge second wave now. The innovation ecosystems as a rule showed remarkable kind of flexibility, which I suppose is the heart of innovation in meeting the COVID-19 challenges. They were able to overcome quickly some institutional barriers between cooperation that typically exist between, say, university and hospital and so forth. There were innovative solutions found to obtain protective equipment and other kind of medical equipment. The pandemic actually has had a positive impact in helping society to see the importance of science and research and development. And the biggest unifying kind of consideration for everyone in all of our ecosystems is the safety of everyone concerned in the process, everyone in the ecosystem. So I'll go through our comments in a little bit more detail, what we looked at in the ecosystems in terms of the flow of people, the flow of capital, and the flow of knowledge from one sector to another, one institution to another. So let's look at the flow of people. Next slide, please. So the biggest, most noticeable impact of the current pandemic has been this shift to work from home. Now, some activities in the laboratories had to continue in the labs, and some ecosystems had to get special exceptions for those laboratory activities to continue. But most of us, including those of us who are involved in scientific discovery, are doing a lot more of our work at home. This is accompanied by an overall acceleration in the adoption by companies of digital technologies. So really, we're seeing digital transformation accelerated greatly. Along with working from home, we're seeing a huge absence of international travel. This actually led to some issues. Some ecosystems were not able to hire particular experts from foreign countries that they had already initiated the search process for. And it's had a negative impact on the flow of students and other researchers. What this means is it means it's more difficult to start something new. If you have a working group, you can network quite well and get projects done, but starting new things is an issue. Over the long term, most of us expect to return to some sort of hybrid model. There will be more work from home than before, but probably there will be a return to in-person meetings. One reason is the need for kind of serendipitous stimulation of new ideas that you get just from meeting and talking to people about non-task activities. So we expect more shift back toward the office, but it won't ever go back as it was. We also think that this kind of digital transformation is still early stage. With the next generation of new technologies, we may even be able to do more cooperation at a distance, especially augmented reality and virtual reality technologies. So the flow of people has made a major kind of shift to distributed work from home environments, but we're social people and social animals, and we're not going to stop working together in person. Let's go to the flow of capital. The national research and development budgets from the governments have remained quite stable. Part of this is this awareness of how important research and development is. Now, there is some concern that we may see some reprogramming of funds toward midterm research and away from really basic science, and also possibly more toward medical-related applications and away from other fields. This is still too early to tell. The national research budgets tend to operate on a 1 year to 3 year kind of framework. Existing industry is kind of behaving in a predictable way. They're cutting back their core business. They're divesting themselves from activities that they see as non-core. This is expected in a major economic downturn. But there's also a recognition by most major companies that a bad time for sales, a bad time for the economy, is an opportunity to invest in learning more about your customers and looking for new opportunities. They're taking a hybrid model and actually instituting new kinds of POC projects, proof of concept projects, with startup companies in a number of areas, especially artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and so forth. We found that in several of our ecosystems, venture capital funding has actually increased during the pandemic. So support for startups is still strong, but this is moving backward moving toward later stages of funding. There's been a sharp reduction in the number of first funding, very early stage deals, seed stage deals, and more funding going to continuing helping existing portfolio companies, which will have a longer time to get to profitability in this kind of an economic downturn. What we don't see that is a big kind of looming possibility is what will happen as governments have to pay off the major debts that they are incurring in order to provide the social kind of survival packages that they've really had to provide to major segments of the population. So we don't know what's going to happen with lots more government debt over the long run. But so far, funding looks relatively stable. Let's go to the flow of knowledge. Next slide. Thank you. So several people mentioned in our working group that working from home actually seems to be giving people more time to write up their research. there's been an increase in the number of technology disclosures filed with technology transfer organizations for patenting. But the real kind of disadvantage is the loss of the unstructured meetings over coffee, accidental discussions that often lead to new discoveries about new opportunities or new solutions to problems. So that has been a barrier to the flow of knowledge by serendipity. The digital transformation acceleration is going beyond the mere adoption of digital technology and is really leading companies to explore new business models and new ways of interacting both with their internal teams and also with their external stakeholders. So we are seeing an acceleration of a trend that really started a number of years ago. The long-term impact, and this kind of sums up the entire finding of the working group, is that we're not going to return to the way things were in pre-pandemic ways. To a certain extent, ecosystems are always dynamic equilibrium. And so they are always self-optimizing for ever-changing conditions. The pandemic has, in fact, highlighted the importance of regional relationships and cross-sector relationships to improve national resilience to these kind of unexpected problems and some of the problems that we can kind of foresee in the future. So, if anything, innovation is more important in everyone's awareness even than it was before. So to talk about these kinds of points, I'd like to ask, first of all, our panelists to give their kind of 5 minutes each of prepared remarks. And I'd like to start with Greg Morin. Greg, how do things look from Chicago?
Things are looking great. First, thank you very much for the opportunity here, and thank you, Karen, for organizing this great venue. So a few remarks here. So like Richard said, aside from the fact that I don't expect I'll ever work from a regular office again, I am hoping that international travel, will come back into vogue, so we can gather again in Grenoble properly next year. I'm going to speak to two major transformations in the Chicagoland ecosystem, both involving engagement of regional scientists, political leaders, and industry. So first, surprisingly, being a scientist has become a lot cooler. People are much more appreciative now of our research community, what they can do in a time of need, and work by our local research community is constantly in the news. I thought the video from Tsukuba was interesting, where scientists are part of the regional policy making and advising local politicians on what to do in the city. That is decidedly not the case in Chicago, where trash and plowing of snow and unions are, pretty much the rule of the day. But regional epidemiologists and infectious disease experts remain, in high demand and have become local celebrities. They're all over the regional and national media on an ongoing basis. One of my neighbors, Emilie, a University of Chicago infectious disease expert, regularly briefs our governor, the Chicago mayor, local officials, and even local primary school teachers and parents on how to be safe during the pandemic. Our scientists have become very effective at helping manage the pandemic through public policy recommendations on gatherings and density and mass type, essential workers, and pandemic modeling. I will say there's many mathematical and agent-based models out there for the spread and effect of COVID. And for what I've seen locally, the modeling of future impacts on decisions by our elected officials has proven incredibly accurate. The trends are consistently within margins of error. And I know in one case in Argonne, we leveraged a model that we developed for Chicago for the spread of Ebola coming out of O'Hare Airport. And it's proven very effective working with local governments. The other big impact I'll touch on was the integration of big pharmaceutical companies with the regional research complex. In Chicagoland, we spend over $1 billion annually in health research. And the pharmaceutical industry has always been engaged with Argonne and research universities. but the pandemic pushed the ecosystem to come together very aggressively and work on development of a vaccine. It's the first time this value chain really has come together to help accelerate what is traditionally a very, very slow process. Yes, it was a national effort, but there were many elements located in Chicagoland with a large reliance on protein discovery and use of artificial intelligence methods to identify molecules for drug targets. And a local group, elements of a local group were awarded a special Gordon Bell Prize for this work recently for helping develop and understand the dynamics of the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. As far as how these impacts are long lasting, I suspect I'll be working here in my basement, much for the rest of my career, providing both flexibility and an eventual, improvement in quality of life. Hopefully, the future of governments leveraging researchers for crisis management will continue. It's always hard to tell, but I think the power of using artificial intelligence for drug discovery and that whole ecosystem is here to stay, and that has proven an enormous improvement. As far as lessons from ecosystem resilience, I think to first order, you need to be ready, and you need to be ready to be flexible, right? A crisis is no time for developing plans, and any plans we've made, really change with the reality on the ground once a crisis occurs. One aspect of a resilient ecosystem is being engaged and supportive of each other in a time of crisis, ensuring both survival and leveraging of critical resources and capabilities. Regional startups and medical research staff, right from the beginning, helped develop new mask and ventilator technologies when shortages occurred, back in the February and March timeframe. And one of the most cited papers ever for a epidemiological publication was from Chicago researchers and engineers verifying the effectiveness of various types of cloth masks that, to spread to COVID. So just a few thoughts. Thank you, Richard, for the time, and I'll pass it on to my colleagues.
Innovate. You can't wait until you have an idea. And so you can't wait until you have a crisis. That's a really good point. Next, I'd like to call on Professor Koby Rubinstein to talk to us about the big impact at the Technion.
For some reason, my video is not on. Oh, how we go. Okay.
Hi, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So I want to start with numbers. If I look back, then in 2019, the Technion had 3 contracts with the 2 major hospitals we typically work with, 2 research contracts. In 2020, the number increased by a factor of 10. And I think it's probably a major impact on innovation that we saw this year, and it's certainly here to stay for, I hope, for a very long time. We learned how to work with the hospitals, how to understand what they need, and hopefully also to solve the problem. For the entire innovation ecosystem, well, in principle, in Israel, we used to work under times of emergency, in cases of crisis. I mean, I myself has happened to lead through at least 3 major wars, so we have some experience in the very fast changing the research infrastructure to times of emergency, which means to work under conditions of emergency, lockdown in the pandemic, for example, or under conditions of war, and also to switch work towards what's needed in times of emergency. But this specific case, this pandemic is unusual because it's so long. because it's so long, we're really unprepared for this. So we have to find ways to deal with this crisis. It's a long-term crisis. And looking back, I don't think that the innovation ecosystem was much affected by this. There was no great effect. I mean, the startup companies kept working, our researchers kept working, the laboratories kept working. So all in all, the impact was mostly in the ability to switch to do more medical research and to be more attentive to immediate needs of physicians.
Hi. Are we back live? So
Yes.
You're live, all right.
Koby, I'm afraid for me, your last statement got broken up. Could you give that again?
Well, I don't even remember what I ate for breakfast today. I think I remember my last sentence. Well, basically, my main point at the end was that surprisingly, there was no major effect on the startup scene in Israel during the pandemic. Companies kept working, funding kept flowing. Working from home is not so good, but very quickly, people found a way to overcome the lockdown and go and work together.
Thank you. And so do you see a continuance of this shift toward more medical-related, biomed-related activities, or do you think that, do you think other sectors, other application areas may suffer as a result?
Oh, I hope very much that the pandemic will be over and can do other things, but certainly our ability to work with hospitals, with clinicians, has improved dramatically, and this is here to stay.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much for your comments. We'll all have a conversation after everyone's comments are finished. I'd like to ask Dr. Stephen Su to tell us a little bit about the situation in Hsinchu and Taiwan, big impacts, and what are the lessons to learn?
Are you able to show my slide?
So we should have slides now. That's great. Next.
Okay. Why it's coming up? Yes. We are from Hsinchu, Taiwan, since it's a small country, small city. So the ecosystem that we are talking about is basically integrating most of the cities in Taiwan anyway. And as you can see on the left, during the pandemic, because something we learned from SARS, which hit us very hard, we were able to mobilize the pretty much a face mask national team consisted of about 50 companies as well as ITRI, a few research institutes in there. And we were able to ramp up 92 production lines in 40 days and coming up with about 20 million face masks per day in 4 months, compared with about 23 million population in Taiwan. And having done that with a few other, for example, the policies in place as of November 27, as you can see that we have about 639 cases with the 95% that are coming from abroad, from different countries, and relatively few deaths in between. So one thing that we learned from this experience is that in the future, not just the PPE's production, we also need to look into resilient industry eco chains, for example, in different sectors of manufacturing. So not going over details, you could see there are 4 areas that we are looking at. From the right, immunity, this is about zero contact protection to maintain high survivability. And the bottom one, just like a body that we need to have non-stop operations, even though that we have a lot of overseas production in Taiwan manufacturing industry. And on the left, to keep a high agility, just like an arm and leg, that we are looking at decentralized manufacturing footprint in the future, and therefore a lot of technology innovation will need to be in place. Lastly, on the top, how can we have offshore manufacturing but still have high value kept in Taiwan through, for example, remote systems and diagnosis, on-site decision with the VI solution developed from Taiwan. And we have seen, even with our TSMC high-tech industry, we still rely on ASML and also applied materials from the US through remote equipment maintenance. Next slide, please. And another topic that Richard has discussed is on the capital flow. We did look at, compare with the 2019 and 2020, what's the difference in the startups. As Richard has mentioned, we are one of the cases that we do see a decrease in deal numbers, around -30%, but we do have higher investment on existing portfolio. So we have an increase by estimate by the year end, about 49%. And briefly, I listed 4 sectors of the startups. So from the top right, it's using AI for marketing intelligence, even helping travel and tourism. In Taiwan, we relatively have no impact. We have 3 weeks of remote working from home, but basically everything else is normal with a face mask. Cybersecurity has received a lot of attention. And some of the healthcare, for example, that you see here, the Deep 01, very small print, is regarding helping physicians to look at brain CT images and deciding which patient that he should be helping first with the AI assistance. And on the top left, that remains to be watched. Some of the cross-industry innovations are coming up, and that's something that we are still monitoring. So relatively speaking, that we are looking at the just the beginning of sort of this during pandemic and post-pandemic startup ecosystem in Taiwan. Back to you, Richard.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. Next, I'd like to call on Ms. Emilie Viasnoff of the CEA Technology to give us some comments. Emilie, I forget, do you have slides?
Yes, I have, and here are the slides. Thank you, Richard, for the invitation and for giving me this opportunity to comment about the link between resilience and innovation and the way we see it here from Grenoble and Ceretec. As you know, Ceretec is the technology research unit of CEA, and it aims at disseminating key enabling technologies to accelerate transition. And I think with the crisis, we learned that we really need to accelerate all kinds of transition, whether they be digital, energy, or else. As you know, also Ceretec belongs to several ecosystems at different scales, starting from the local one up to international, of course, ecosystems, and going through all of the different scales, regional, national, and of course, European. Each level at each scale have faced this pandemic, and they have tackled the problem with some specific solutions at each scales. But I think they all have been impacted by the crisis in the same manner. And I think it's pretty obvious from all the presentation that we are seeing since this morning. In terms of major impacts, I think they are essentially of 2 kinds. The first one, of course, was about health emergency to help to limit the pandemic. So it's the same in Grenoble as everywhere else worldwide. Of course, Ceretec has taken part in many initiatives to try to limit the pandemic. We had some actions like others on masks fabrication using 3D printing. We had some project on making artificial ventilators. It has been mentioned earlier today. Of course, we have developed also some new tests, and we were part of vaccine project. And also, which is maybe more specific, we also have dedicated some of our high performance computing resources to fight against COVID, helping, for instance, to simulate the virus spread. So this was the first kind of impact. In addition to this health emergency, we had to face, of course, a second impact, which was mainly economic, because we faced a decrease of operations, also as an organization, as a research organization, because we have so many partnerships with so many partners, industrial and even academic. And during the first lockdown, especially in France, we were trying to resist with pretty much a lack of anticipation and preparation to this worldwide crisis. But because this lack of preparation, we had a strong decrease of operation, even within Ceretec. It was a decrease of ongoing project, but also on the signature and the discussion on future projects with maybe as an innovation organization is even more tricky. But then during the second lockdown, in which we are still now in France, we have started to think that maybe we should not resist, but we should try to transform ourselves. And maybe because we have this better knowledge on the virus, we were more prepared to use digital interaction, because we have also in such a way anticipate the crisis. Then the impact of the second lockdown was much lower than the impact of the first one. And then I think there is also a third impact which didn't occur immediately at the very beginning of the crisis, but we had some kind of societal impacts because there was this environmental awareness, I think, that grew during the first lockdown. There was also some kinds of acceptance or of digital technologies, seeing as critical and often vital resources to keep the exchanges between people. And also in terms of societal impact, I think people was then seeing the future as being uncertain more than before. And it brings me to opportunities. Can I have the next slide, please? Yes. So to me, this crisis was an opportunity to know really what resilience is about. And resilience is not only resistance, it's also dealing with transformation. So resilience is resistance plus some adaptations through transformation. And at Ceretec, we started some work on thinking about how, from a research organization, we should learn and we should apply this resilience to ourselves and to the development of our technology. So we asked ourselves two questions. Are we really developing the key enabling technologies that are critical to reinforce the resilience of systems? Are AI, cybersecurity, or 3D printing the technologies that we need to improve the resilience of society, of cities, of industry? And then also from a methodological point of view, probably we have to think about should we continue to make innovation the same way as before? What I mean is at the beginning of the 20th century, innovation means somehow progress. Nowadays, it means innovation means competitivity, means new product. Probably in the future, innovation will be more about designing new products, new systems under constraints, whether there be climate constraints or pandemic or whatever. and maybe we have to rethink our way of making innovation. And so to conclude, maybe the main lessons I think we learned from this crisis are of three kinds. Well, the first one is obvious, but crisis can occur and it can have really strong impacts. And there is a strong need to anticipate future crises, because the better we anticipate, the smoother we can go through crisis. The second lesson is crisis can also reset systems and foster new ideas, new methodologies. For instance, in Europe, for instance, there has been a major change, even if maybe we were not quick enough at the beginning, but still, Europe really took charge of its future, and probably it was a long time ago since we didn't had such a movement in Europe. We try to think that we have to reconvert or revive industrial sectors at larger scale to accelerate also transition, and especially the Green Deal, with the Green Deal and the recovery plan that we decided. And finally, I think we all learned that transition should be accelerated in the field of environment and climate, of course, but also the digital transition. I mean, digital tools were really helpful, but they also had some limitation. And of course, we have to accelerate also the transition in health to fight against future pandemics. So I stop here. I think we'll have some times further for more discussion. Thank you, Richard.
Right. Thank you, Emilie. And I would like to kind of follow up. There's a very small point on your last slide about the crisis can reset systems. So I'm curious what you were thinking of with regard especially to kind of system reset there.
System was, I was thinking about methodology essentially, or so I think we will not do innovation or design new products in the future after the crisis than we are doing before the crisis. So I think we have to reset our way of innovating, probably taking into account the constraint I mentioned. And the second point was it was really a great movement in Europe. I think also really we all felt in Europe that Europe really took in charge its future, and with this historical recovery plan. I mean, it was so to my point of view, it's a kind of resetting the European system and putting new bases.
I think that's a really profound point that I hope we can come back to, because it involves not only innovating under new constraints, but really with awareness of new kind of importances of new kinds of issues like the climate situation. And so I do hope we can come back to this. First, though, I'd like to ask Mr. Emmanuel Rouede of the city of Grenoble to give some comments. Emmanuel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Richard. I'd like to share with you the point of view of a city facing nearly a year of pandemic crisis management. We set up our crisis unit in February and kept it active since then. The main issues we had to address were how to maintain the continuity of public service with various lockdown regulations, develop work from home, correct supply chain failures, and respond to the basic needs of people who were directly exposed to the social consequences of the pandemic. I'd like to present two emblematic examples. On the one hand, our local innovation ecosystem gave us some solutions. Local engineers developed a new design of reusable surgical mask, and a local factory specialized in military and Air Force pilot masks switches in a few days its production lines to this face mask. You can see on the picture the man is wearing one of them, the gray and orange one. Innovation and reactivity were of a great help for us when supply chains were in complete failure. But on the other hand, what gave us the most help was the solidarity of Grenoble citizens. Thousands of people joined the online platform, Volontaires Solidaires, that we set up in a few days to propose help for their neighbors in need. Once again, we could verify that in Grenoble, we can rely on two pillars, social innovation and technological innovation. Next slide, please. What we learned from this crisis was that resilience relies not only on techs, but also on social innovations. That the local authorities are sometimes more resilient and relevant than state. And that to be resilient, you have to rely both on scientific knowledge and on citizens. That's why we settled both an advisory scientific committee and a citizen advisory panel. This pandemic crisis has to be seen as a prequel of what the climate crisis announces. Grenoble belongs to the network of cities in transition, and we see these events as a confirmation that we have to stay the course of transitions and learn from the crisis to come. Next slide, please. As a last example of resilience that I want to share with you, while we were managing the pandemic crisis on a day-to-day basis, we succeeded in the European Green Capital Contest. The European Union awarded to Grenoble the 2022 European Green Capital title. And I'd like to thank all the members of our innovation ecosystem who supported us, and especially the CEA and Karen Amran was with us on October the 8th for the final audition. This is a big success for all of us, and hoping that international travel will be much easier, we kindly invite you to visit us in 2022 for a lot of events to share your inspirations for ecological transition. Thank you.
Emmanuel, thank you very much. You mentioned social innovation in your prepared remarks as being as important as technology innovation. Could you maybe give a kind of specific example of what you're thinking about?
We build, as I said, an online platform that's on which thousands of people just get on this platform to share help, basic help for people in need who couldn't go to the market, who couldn't bring to the home the basic needs, that the basic goods they had to boat. Also to distribute some meals to old people in need. And this was a very great moment of solidarity. We had a great stress among the people, but this stress also generated a real solidarity movement among a lot of people during this period. And just a few simple online platform, which was built, coded in a few days, was the good response for the need of the people at the time. So some just linking on the needs, the demands, and what the people were able to offer, what was only something that could have not have happened in normal time. But in this crisis time, this solidarity movement has really been developed.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments. We'll come back to these topics when we have our conversation. Next, I'd like to ask Peter Ylén of Tampere, Finland, to talk to us about the situation from your perspective. Peter?
Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me. when we are talking about COVID effects, then we can say the first stage is buffering. So how well all the cities and regions were prepared against the epidemics. And we can say that most of the countries in the world failed bad, at least at the first stage. The second stage was already better, so then you knew some ideas that were happening. Then we talk about resilience, so how you can get back to normal operations from the virus. And this was the topic today. We were talking a lot about these short-term epidemiologic things and what kind of services are there. A little bit about agility. I think the discussion with Emilie, for instance, is that we are not going back to the normal that was before the epidemics, but we are going to the new normal, which is different. And agility requires sort of, if we look at agility from industry point of view, they succeeded very well. Existing plants were starting to produce hand sanitation and examples you just saw in the previous presentation. The policymakers, they did okay. At the beginning, they were kind of vague and there were pressure to limit the travel and close the countries, and then economic pressure to open them, and there was lots of discussion back and forth. They are getting better as well, but there's still discussion what to do. Short-term and long-term impacts are often very opposite, and typical is that people do panic decisions. Something has to be done now, and then the long-term effect, ripple effects of those and unwanted side effects can be very bad on the long term. And decision makers are held accountable for these decisions, and it's nice to see that they are more agile after this. So you have to change your old perceptions and things, how things have happened. Now, if we look at the resilience part, then at least in Finland, the focus on academic science, there's still funding for that. A little bit focus on healthcare and these kind of things, green ideas, they kind of boosted a little bit over the traditional topics in basic research. When we talk about applied sort of technological research, then there was great need for new solutions, and the focus was changing much more rapidly than in basic research. There were practical needs of new kind of solutions there. The entrepreneurial motor that was kind of coughing at certain parts, but this was sectorial, meaning that certain sectors of businesses, they were suffering. Businesses that were demanding local presence and these kind of things like entertainment and restaurants. These were suffering, but then it was, as you said, Richard, it was kind of a boost for many sectors. So all kind of knowledge-based and ICT-based solutions, it was a great boost for them. So there's sort of people, companies who succeed and others who don't. What was also talked in previous presentations is that there's market disruption and new formation, and this was sort of, it was very quick. So I would say that new markets and new needs, they were, in few weeks, you can see that there's new digital market growing. And also one part is the regime resistance that used to be very strong. So for instance, when you work, many companies said that, of course, you have to come to the office and work, otherwise we cannot supervise you. But then they suddenly change overnight their policies, and now they see that this is actually pretty good in many topics. Of course, we will go back to the office every now and then, but basically it's sort of all this resistance of new digital solutions, it was lowered significantly as a result of that. Now, if we talk about the long-term effects, so these were kind of medium time and short-term effects. Long-term effects, the idea for policymakers, for lists, and we have done lots of projects with Reboot project for cities and countries, how to do after coronavirus. So what kind of decisions need to be done? So they are aiming for creating positive reinforcing spiral of things with leverage variables. So what are the small things you have to nudge, like public procurement for creating new innovation ecosystems and how to do that so that cities don't have to do everything by themselves. They have to nudge a little bit, and then things start reinforcing themselves. They want to anticipate and avoid harmful side effects, and this is close to the panic reactions. So they do panic reactions, and then they have to live with the impacts you get from that. And they want to identify risk and minimize those. We developed with Nordic West Office 4 scenarios for future, what happens after coronavirus. There were a couple of factors, and one was, are we focusing on national or international part, or other things, the new ecosystems dominated by regulation or market forces? And if we look at the national and regulated stuff, then there's, of course, a risk for closing the borders and sort of we protect the citizens from immigration and epidemics, and we bring all these industries back to our country. It creates completely different innovation ecosystem. It's not necessarily the future we want to see, but in certain countries there are signals towards popular politics in this. If this happens, then there's a different kind of innovation that have to be done. I believe more in international state that there's regulation. In EU level, at least, there will be Green Deal things we just talked. And this will mean that there will be new innovations in green and sustainability and carbon neutrality. And this will be all the member countries in EU at least. And this will determine very different sort of innovation ecosystem with the basic funding. Now, if we go from regulation to market power, then there's the growth, technology and capitalism will pull the world economy from COVID recession. So then there's sort of economic boost that will come from that. There's digitalization, there's all kinds of new industries. And it will create, again, a different kind of, then we can forget a little bit about green values, which we shouldn't. But if it's only what brings the money, then this is kind of the future. But I actually believe in sort of local circular economy and working remotely. They are the new normal. So it means that there will be new innovation ecosystems with, you don't have to go somewhere to work. All the things you said, like artificial intelligence and augmented reality and virtual reality, they will increase that you can work from anywhere to any company, and they can have the best workforce from anywhere. And there will be circular economy in locally. And in all of these cases, you see very different future and different kind of innovation ecosystem. And things we do these simulation models, management flight simulators for decision makers. So when we do these kind of things, can we affect? And if there is EU regulation that is coming from outside, what kind of things we have to do in policy decisions on short term to create different kind of ecosystem. I think I spent my 5 minutes. Thank you.
Peter, thank you. We have some really interesting audience questions. And before we get into kind of the 3 main questions that I wanted to ask everyone, Peter, how do you see the balance for this virtual social community versus a in-person kind of social world? Especially for young people, it's kind of hard to tell the difference, I think, sometimes.
Yes.
Do you think we will have a need to worry about that kind of loss of sense of reality?
It is possible. We don't know. We might already live in the matrix. So I believe that in the future, when I go to work, I will put virtual glasses on and I will do all the social interaction, like coffee machines and all kinds of non-work related stuff also in virtual reality. And this is something that we see more and more, and this will change definitely the way of working and these kind of things. At the moment, we are concentrating that we do Teams meetings and go-to meetings, and it's mainly work-related stuff. But we want to have this social aspect of things, and I think this will be the next stage. So we log into our workplace, and then we have all these social interactions there as well. Some things are, of course, missing,
Okay. Thank you. Greg, you're the person who said you were going to probably work from home for the rest of your career. I'm curious how you see the situation of distinguishing between virtual world and a real world. Greg Morin? Is Greg offline? No, here we are.
Here we go. Thanks, Richard. You know, it's interesting. I've had a couple of virtual happy hours, you know, in the Zoom environment, and if people are craving interaction. I find the virtual reality model perhaps, you know, something. There's only so much you can do working from home for a while. The development of new relationships is exceptionally challenging in that environment. So, you know, the development of, you know, virtual coffee bars or bars, you know, maybe some place to get out of it. The challenge has, you know, if only a few people are going back to the office, you go to your office and you're on your computer and you're having Zoom meetings with your door closed. And so it's not different. So that's, I don't know what the solution for that situation is, but it's going to be a challenge when you have sort of some people in the office and some people not. Now, there are many people that have been working as a, you know, remote worker, you know, for firms for decades, and they tell me it is very hard, and so I don't know what the solution is, but we've figured this out, and I'm sure that, you know, innovations such as virtual reality and other ideas will come to the forefront.
Okay. Thank you. I would like to move on to address an issue. In all of our presentations and everyone's comments, you get this sense that change is happening, and yet that's really almost a normal situation. It's just that we've had an unexpected crisis, and so we're called on to change more quickly and to have more flexibility. But resilience really involves ability to change, to innovate, more than it does to hold on to old ways of doing things. So, of course, one of the kinds of sectors in any innovation system that claims to be trying to change the world is the startup sector. And I would like to ask Emilie and then Emmanuel about the startup sector in Grenoble and how it may be responding to the current crisis. Emilie, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Richard. So as you know, Ceretec, like many other research organizations disseminating technologies towards industry, are working with a lot of startups, more than 50 for the moment, most of them being deep tech. So they somehow suffer from the crisis, but it was also an opportunity for most of them to, as I said before, to reset somehow their thought. For instance, Aledia, during the first lockdown, decided to industrialize its smart display technology, and they decided to build a manufacturing site in south of Grenoble, just close to the place where the initial technology was born. And I don't know what would have happened without the crisis, but maybe this decision of keeping close to the research, the manufacturing site, would not have been the same. We don't know, but it was also maybe some awareness from the city, from the department, from the also region, that it was critical to keep some industry sites also in France, which was not in the same kind of movement that the decades before. So there was this movement of relocalization, which benefit to some kinds of startups we are working on, and especially Aledia. Then I think some other startups also think about maybe we should refocus on critical subjects, for instance, renewable energies. I said that we should accelerate the transition in energy, and we had some discussion in France about how we can also build some manufacturing site for producing these capabilities for renewable energy, and I think it has been accelerated because of the crisis. And also, I think we thought that digital technologies are also have also to be a concern for France and Europe, and we accelerated also on incubating a lot of projects on digital topics, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and maybe not to leave that only to other countries. And finally, of course, we have a lot of startups we are working with in the health domain. Of course, that one's really somehow benefit from the pandemics and have accelerated, like for instance, Diabloop, which safely automates and personalize the treatment of type 1 diabetes. And so we have a lot of examples of such startup in the health domain that have somehow benefits to raise funds during the crisis. So it's more and I think it's also the shared between the panel an optimistic point of view on how the crisis was finally an opportunity also from startups, whether it be from a relocalization, refocusing, or fundraising point of view. Richard, we are not hearing you. You're on mute.
Thank you for reminding me. So, Emmanuel, from the city's point of view, how do you see the startup sector responding to the crisis?
I'm not a lot much to say than what Emilie has already said, and she has a much more precise view of the startup sector than I do. I would say that maybe something that might be important in the next years and next months, it will be the opportunities that the Green New Deal and transition politics that the city, the metropolis, and the state and the European Union are introducing will be a very interesting opportunity for startups and for entrepreneurs, because we have seen this crisis as a real sign that we have to stay the course of transition, and we really need to involve our action into this scheme. And when it deals about urban mobility, energy, and all the things that will be really important in the transformation of the territories, there will be a lot of opportunities for the startups and all the economic sector in next months.
So this is really responding to a question from the audience. You're using the word opportunity, which is a very wonderful, positive word. Is being recognized as the green capital of Europe really going to lead to a bigger challenge?
It will be both an opportunity and a challenge. In fact, from my experience in Grenoble, we really love challenges. When things are too easy, that's not the things at which we are the best. We really like to be challenged and to face a real challenge. And when it's difficult, we have more chances to succeed. In fact, we don't like the easy way. So it's both for us. For us, it's both an opportunity and a challenge, and that's a good thing because it is a real opportunity to introduce and to have people change their way of living, their focus points, and to change things into a new transition scheme. And it is a challenge because it will be difficult. We'll have to organize 1 year of events, and we'll set some challenges within the 12 fields that the green capitals are on which the European Union selects the green capitals. We will try to mobilize both public and private sector into these local challenges to have some milestones and to mark the 2022 years as an important date for our territory.
Okay, thank you very much. Back to our kind of theme on startups, 2 of the 10 great startups that were featured in the program today are from Taiwan. And I'd like to ask Stephen for your comments about how the startup sector in Taiwan responded to the crisis.
Thanks for the question, Richard. I think the start, as I mentioned, that we see a decrease in deal number, but an increase in the investment. Partially, I think that in Taiwan, we do not have a real lockdown. But however, some of the startups took the opportunity to demonstrate their value in the resilient ecosystem. So for example, that we have one startup a company wrote this real simple app that basically links all the inventories of the pharmacies that are distributing face masks during the first few months when we were not yet ramping up to the maximum volume, and that really alleviate people's anxiety in getting in line to wait for face mask rationing. And another simple thing that ITRI did was using AI algorithm in a chatbot situation to help greet people who are in the 14 days quarantine when coming into Taiwan to alleviate the burden of the municipals that is supposed to check these quarantine people on a daily basis. And so these little things, I think, that got people rolling, especially the ones that already gone through the first 2 series of funding. So going back to, I think, the startup system, even before COVID-19, probably has been getting a little bit more funding than usual in the last 5 years. So COVID-19 give them more opportunities to demonstrate their capabilities. For example, they usually could not get the right data from mobile operators. But during COVID-19, they were able to get some data to demonstrate that they can track down people, make something good out of the data instead of staying away due to privacy. So a few things here and there, I think that it's good. The startup ecosystem was able to sustain during this time.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to other kind of topic. One of the things that we see in all of these ecosystems is continuing what I would call self-optimization or rebalancing. And an ecosystem, by definition, is a group of interacting organisms and institutions that really no one institution is in control. So how to find a good new balance of power in helping the innovation move forward is one of the key challenges for every ecosystem. In that regard, I want to especially ask about the role of international cooperation. And if I could, I'd like to start with Koby, asking Dr. Rubinstein if you would comment about the ecosystem that you're in and how international cooperation plays a role in responding to crises like the COVID-19.
Well,
Koby, floor is yours.
Yeah. Okay, now you give me the right to use the video. Well, I'm talking from the Israeli experience. Israel, like Taiwan, is really an island, not a physical island, but a practical island. So, and also the Israeli economy is small. So we are really, we need the international cooperation, and we don't found a startup in Israel aiming at the Israeli market. You always aim at the world market. And the restrictions on travel are having some effect on us in two ways. First of all, as you said, the cooperation. It's difficult to cooperate when you cannot travel. Just doing it online is not enough. So a company that already has some connections abroad, already has some small market, can maintain it. But it's hard to open new market, and it's very, very hard to start a company that does not have a market yet to start. So right now, this is we are now in the beginning of December, and it takes time for this effect to take place. And sometimes it reminds me of a person falling from the Empire State Building, and when the person reaches the 40th floor, he says, "So far, so good," but there's some way to go down. And I'm afraid that lack of international cooperation is going to have some effect on startups, not only in Israel, but also elsewhere in the world. You're mute, Richard.
Yes, thank you. I think I'm back. Thank you for your comment. I want to move on and ask Greg Morin about how international cooperation can help the ecosystem in Chicagoland really continually rebalance itself. Greg, floor is yours.
Thanks, Richard. So I would say the number one complaint when I'm talking to colleagues in the ecosystem resulting from the COVID is we've lost our postdocs, we've lost our exchange opportunities, and that is really the source of the top talent here, in the area. And I think the impact.
Hi, sorry everyone. I seem to be having some issues with the internet. Greg, did you hear my question? I'd like to ask your comments. Great.
I'm about halfway through my answers. So I think the challenge here, right? So we have an international complement of researchers come to the area, engage in our laboratories and universities, and then often these young scientists become part of the startup community as technical experts in startups, and that is a real challenge. Now, I think that Peter's statement about being able to have the best workforce from anywhere is possible, but we have to we're going to have to work on how that supports the startup community. That's something I think we can get through at higher up in the food chain, but that's a real challenge. So. I know some of the automation of our scientific user facilities and other facilities here is helping us to engage internationally more, but how that translates into helping with startups is a challenge.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. Peter, you had mentioned EU level international cooperation in your prepared remarks. I wonder if you would go a little bit further into how this kind of cooperation can help an ecosystem to keep itself continually rebalancing.
Yes, I think this is the international cooperation is I think becoming more easy during the coronavirus. For instance, during this 1 week I have been in Mexico, in London, in Japan, and now in Grenoble, and I would not be able to do all that if I would have to travel everywhere. And I have a couple of projects in Japan going on, and one in South Korea and one in London, and some of them are more academic, and some of them are practical cases for paying customers. So I think it's already the collaboration is different. The meetings are different. I would say that I have with customers and partners, I have half-an-hour meetings every week from 8 to 8:30. And then the collaboration, then there's no more chit-chat. You just go to the point and then you get things done. So I think I'm much more productive in all kinds of collaboration. As it was said in the previous presentations, it's nice to get things face-to-face every now and then, meaning that for the beginning, the initial part, it would be nice to see and meet people. But when you cannot do that, it's still possible with virtual tools. And I think this kind of international collaboration, it has become more efficient and easy. Now it's kind of ironic to say that because Richard dropped out of this meeting, but it has become more easy and more productive. And I think there's more and more collaboration. Of course, it depends. Things that just was pointed out, that if you need local presence in startups, if you need laboratory equipment, then of course this is something that cannot be done virtually, not yet. But I think otherwise the international collaboration has become much easier and more efficient.
Not sure if I could jump in while Richard is away at the moment. In terms of international collaboration, we do see, for example, in Asia, that when we have earthquakes, that different countries jumping in to the rescue site, utilizing their knowledges and also equipment. And this time that COVID-19, we do see, for example, companies like Medtronic open up their respiratory design. So for example, Taiwan ITRI was able to do the redesign within 70 days or so. I think in the future, beyond COVID-19, for example, that the climate change issues and also, for example, online education issue for the underprivileged communities, I think that we can expect more international collaboration through different teleconferencing or AR/VR means.
Yes, I agree, and even many kind of things like augmented reality. You can even do sort of help be as a doctor even without doctoral training. You can say that when you have video picture and then this is things you have to do if there's no doctor available, and this will change the world as well. Sorry, Richard, we continued talking when you dropped out. Go ahead.
No, thank you. You're a great panel, because when I have trouble with connecting, you take over. That's wonderful. The international cooperation, though, is Emilie. Emilie, would you talk a little bit about how international cooperation can help the Grenoble ecosystem to continually rebalance itself?
Yes, I think I got the question. Even so, the internet connection is not so good. So of course we need some balance, and I think having these international exchanges and moments where we can cross-fertilize at some points each other with our ideas, our methodology, or whatever, is really something we have to keep. Because this definitely helps different ecosystems to remain strong enough so that they can continue to partner with other ecosystem. And we need this kind of balance where we have, of course, this international playground with different ecosystems, but we need also that each geographical hub is strong itself as well. International should be balanced with local, and we really need these two scales working together. And I think the COVID crisis showed us that with this kind of international interactions, we are definitely more resilient together. Because there is some strength in numbers, of course. So we need cooperation. It's an asset, definitely, for everyone. And of course, association like the High Level Forum can help keeping these international interactions so that every ecosystem can stimulate each other together, so that everybody is strong enough to cooperate together.
Thank you, and I want to congratulate the panel on your resilience despite our connectivity problems. Very last quick question for everyone on the panel, and Emilie, you really kind of saw it in advance. How can an organization like High Level Forum really help increase your own ecosystem's resilience through international cooperation? Greg, why don't you go first? Greg, Morin.
Speaking of bad connection, sorry about that. No, I think the HLF really is about the lessons learned. I'm just watching the videos of all the ecosystems and the interactions here. I mean, I've got 2 pages of notes of just great ideas just from this panel conversation. So it's a huge value to all who participate.
Thank you, Greg. Stephen, why don't we go to you next?
Okay, I think it's like annual health checkup. Annual health checkup is important, but it's what you do in between exercise, medicine to help improve the body. And I think through this time, even though we do not meet in Grenoble, that we had quite a few online discussions. I think going forward, such platform can be further extended.
Thank you. Koby, what about you? What would you say in your own ecosystem?
Well, for me, the main lesson is today. I heard some very interesting ideas, so some interesting presentations. For example, we learned about what Taiwan did during the pandemic. It's absolutely amazing. I kept writing notes to myself, and I wish people in Israel would do what Taiwan did. So for me, this is a wonderful lesson. Maybe Emilie, you want to take over after Richard? Will you join me?
Yes, Koby, did you finish your comment? I'm sorry, yes, I was off.
Yes, I did.
Okay, let me ask Emilie if you would speak about High Level Forum.
Yeah, so I pretty much already commented about it, but High Level Forum and all kind of association that are stimulating the interactions between the different innovation ecosystems are really of huge value for everyone and for keeping everyone being strong, being creative, being innovative as well. So I would not say anything more than it's really a huge value of keeping this stimulation in the interaction that we have one with each other. probably we have to be resilient, and I have to.
I think maybe we've lost a few members of our panel already. Peter, are you online?
Yes, I'm online.
Well, I think that, as you see, we've found ourselves a way to get by even with connectivity problems, and the overall impression is that the crisis has caused innovation to become apparent to more people in the community. It's caused more support for innovative activities. I think we always have to worry about the balance in our ecosystems. One of the comments from the audience had mentioned special interests who may try to take an undue advantage of, these kind of very difficult social conditions. So we're always in a kind of autonomous, self-improving system. And to do that, to learn from each other, is absolutely a critical point. We need to always be looking at models for what is working well. We need to look at how challenges are applying to different places. And we will go on from this point. Next year, I'm looking forward to an in-person high-level forum summit, as well as to continuing this HLF Connect. I'd like to turn the floor over now to Karen and ask her if she would conclude the program. But first of all, thanks so much, everybody on the panel. You were great.